Welcome back. It is Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and take a look at some custom work that I have done on a couple of figures. Now, there's not too much intricate work on these figures, so I thought I would lump them all together in one video. But maybe you could get some inspiration and work on your own figures that you would like to modify and improve. Now, let's go ahead and get right through it. This might take me a little bit. Now, in the end, I am going to do a little quick tutorial, which, if you all know, I'm not a big fan of doing, but I got so many, questions and requests that I thought I would go ahead and knock it out. Now, first up, I did buy one more Grim Knight on eBay. Now, surprisingly, I think I ended up paying, $18 for this. Maybe 20, but regardless, it was a good purchase. Now, the main reason this was really cheap was because he didn't come with any of his accessories, and also he was missing his left hand. Now, I already knew that the unmasked Thomas Wayne, which I have tons of extras of because that's a figure that I use a lot to do a lot of custom work, they use the same hands as the Grim Knight. So I wasn't too worried about that. But once I did get it and get it in hand, what I did notice was it had a lot of little blemishes. So I cleaned those up. I also touched up the paint where it was a little bit fading in some areas. And then I had to decide what I actually wanted to do with this Grim Knight. Now, if you don't know, this is going to be actually my 10th Grim Knight. I do have 2 still mint in box, and I also have 8 that I have a little bit of custom work on, some repainting, different versions, but always happy to add them to the collection, especially for a good price. So finally, what I decided is I had this extra sort of big revolver blaster and didn't have anything to do with it. So I decided that I would armor him up with this one-handed, weapon use. Now, at first I did swap out the left hand for one of the Thomas Wayne hands, but in the end, what I really wanted to do was actually add a fist. Don't have too many Grim Knights where he actually has a fist. All of them are holding weapons, and a majority of them have the trigger finger hands. So I thought it was pretty cool to add, a fist, add that big, dirty, hairy revolver, just to give him some attitude. And I thought he would fit right in with the rest of my Grim Knight collection. Now, I actually have another custom that I did of Grim Knight, and the only main difference, this guy does have his weapons, backpack. I did give him some dual Desert Eagles, but the main difference with this Grim Knight is that I was never a big fan of the boot cuts that McFarlane did in the very first figures. Just really unappealing, look, basically horrible. And I always wanted to fix this. So what I ended up doing was I actually modified some grifter boots and, grafted them onto the lower legs of Grim Knight. And it actually came out really nice. I added these 2, side sort of blades that he has on his boots to finish it off. But this ended up being my favorite Grim Knight in my collection, mostly because it does fix those ugly ankles that he used to have. He's also a little bit taller, which I prefer. Just a very awesome looking Grim Knight. Now, going from that into my next figure, this sort of coincides, and that is I always had this extra Thomas Wayne Batman from Flashpoint, and I always wanted to modify him, add some paint, really modify the boots, which was the same issue. If you look at the original Thomas Wayne, I actually have my extra right here. The boot cut is the same as the original Grim Knight, where you have that really horrible boot cut. And after a while of trial and error, I didn't know how I was going to fix this, but I just came to notice that the boots from the Keaton Batman from the Flash movie pretty much resembled the Flashpoint boots. They kind of have like this tiered design to them where it's, one level and then goes smaller and smaller down into the ankle. Now, another thing I noticed was that when I actually did reference work on this guy online, the boots are almost never really armored up. They're just your regular Batman boots. So this is something that McFarlane did to his own design of Thomas Wayne from Flashpoint. So I knew that it wouldn't make it a big deal if I switched out these boots for the ones that he originally came with. Now, aesthetically and design wise, they look really good. Gives them a more cleaner look without that ugly, jagged ankle balls that he actually came with. Now he has more of a clean, sleek design to the boots. And of course, I use the unmasked Keaton version of the figure from the Flash movie, and that one will not be hard to pick up again so that I can replace it. Now, another thing I did is he was really plastic. Like if you look at the original standard version, the belt, the body, it's just, done in a molded plastic, has no type of shading or any kind of detail. So I went in and added some dark grays, some light grays, and even some black in the real fine cracks of the costume, dirtied up the belt, and it does give him a more gritty look and a more finished look to this McFarlane figure. So that's another figure that I I worked on, never did a video, but it does kind of piggyback off of the Grim Knight custom work that I did with his boots. I had the same idea when I did this Flashpoint Thomas Wayne Batman. Didn't change the height at all. He's still basically the same height. I actually extended the neck peg, which is something everybody should do for this Thomas Wayne. And I also did the thigh lift. Now, when I did the thigh lift, another thing I noticed was that his trunks, the crotch piece, were made of really hard plastic. So there was absolutely no way to get any sort of mobility or any flexing poses. So that is another thing that I did. Added some soft plastic trunks and then just took off the belt and remolded it around the new trunks, matching up the gray colors throughout the figure. And this gave him a little bit more flexibility and movement in his hips so that you can actually have more fun posing him. So that is another figure that I worked on. Now, sticking with the Flashpoint storyline, I also wanted a new Aquaman from Flashpoint, that sort of general militaristic styled Aquaman. Wasn't a really big fan of the standard release from McFarlane, which of course I do have many of. Now I did customize the McFarlane head to give him a sort of a grimace, with teeth, because this screaming Aquaman you can basically only put him in like a war pose or like a battle cry, and that's the only way that he works. But I of course wanted a more, just sort of brooding Aquaman. So I did order this head online. It came, the way heads come in just that resin gray. I had to add some flesh tone spray and then some spray yellow to the hair. Taped it off, but then I did have to go in with acrylics and match in all the little details. Now I had a hard time with his face and his eyes until I started looking up references of him online. And what I noticed was that a lot of the times this version of Aquaman is drawn with more shadows around the eyes, like darker eyes, because of course he has more of a villainous feel to him. Swapped out his hand and gave him, one of those gesturing tyrant hands. And then I did a complete repaint of his scaled armor. Now the original release was just a soft, although a little bit darker orange. In the comics, it's more of a reddish, glossy armor. So that's what I added to this version of Aquaman. All in all, really fun little project. Gives me some, more options when I want to do a Flashpoint setup, and another little custom that I am really happy with. Now, here's something that I didn't show you guys at all, and that was that I did purchase three of the Vampire Robins, but I never reviewed it, never got around to it, and it is a very good figure, mainly because he comes with a lot of accessories. But what I did notice was that he came with the makings to make an awesome ultimate Damian Wayne. Now, I am a big Damian Wayne fan. I've said this before, he's basically, a jerk just like me. And I feel a little bit of, a kinship to him because we both, have a little bit of a attitude problem, but it is a tiny one. And what I did see in this figure is that if you take the original McFarlane Damian Wayne, which I'm fine with, I do have various ones of these. So I did have enough to do, a custom and swap out some parts. Definitely the legs and the arms, because of course this one comes with double jointed arms, double jointed knees. And although the boots are different, I actually prefer these boots because they cover up those huge ankle ball joints that the original release has. Now, I did prefer this cape with the yellow on the underside, and it doesn't have those like vampire spikes that the original release have. And that's not really what I imagine when I imagine Damian Wayne. So after modifying, after doing a little bit of work, I gave him his, signature katana blade that he always has. And this is now my favorite ultimate Damian Wayne. Now, a big advantage I had was that this vampire Damian Wayne came with tons of hands, a couple of other accessories, and you can adapt these all to your new Damian Wayne. Added a little bit of paint details, like a little bit more yellow, and filled in the blacks just to give it a cleaner look. But by far, this is now my go to Damian Wayne figure, and he looks awesome. You could pose him a lot better with those double joints, and he fits perfectly up on the shelf with the rest of the Bat family. Now, these were all little projects that I just did that I never made videos on, but I have been enjoying the figures. But one thing a lot of people did ask me was about this Hal Jordan custom that I did. Now, I do have it planned to paint him in a more metallic emerald green, but I haven't gotten around to that. But what I did do, he shortened the arms, and that was a big negative that a lot of people had about the original Hal Jordan and also the original John Stewart, was the arms were just way too long and people couldn't figure out a way to shorten them. Now, since this one's, the arms are already done, I did want to go ahead and do another John Stewart that I have for custom work. I have various John Stewarts, so it's not a big deal. But I did want to go through and show you guys how I actually shorten the arms. Now, first thing you got to do is warm this up, pop off the hands, and you should be able to get off the gauntlets without too much trouble. Just a little bit of heat and they will slide off. Now, you see this like sort of long peg that it has. This is where you're going to modify the figure. Now, what you want to be careful of is you do not actually want to cut into where the wrist ball joint pegs into. You want to cut right behind that. And then you want to give about a little bit like half of a quarter inch and cut that off. It's very minimal. Now, you rather cut off a little than too much, but I kind of already had it eyed out the way I knew the arms would look a lot better. Now, once you cut this, it does have a couple of little design lines that help you to line it up the way it actually was, although it will be shorter. So you want to put some super glue, glue this on, but be sure to let this dry for a couple of days so that it, has a little bit of strength to it. But besides that, now you have a shorter peg. Now it does look a little bit weird, but That's not a big deal because, of course, the gauntlets actually cover this up. Now, what you want to do is you want to get the gauntlet, and it has a little bit of trimmings on the inside that you could hit it with the Dremel and shave them down, or you could get a blade and just scrape them off. That's what I did. And what this will allow is for when you heat these gauntlets up, you can push them a lot further back on the arm. Now, originally, when you look at it, you'll see that there's a little gap between where the hinge line is and the forearm. But what you want to do is actually heat this up. Now, you can put glue if you don't want to remove it anymore, but I didn't do it. You don't necessarily have to glue this in place. You could leave it soft, and when it hardens up, it'll actually grip around the wider part of the forearm. And what you want to do is just work it, keep pushing it until you get right onto that line of the hinge. And you'll see on the backside as well that you'll get a lot closer to the pin. Before, there was a big distance between the pin and the gauntlet, and now it's going to be a real small distance because you've pushed this gauntlet, a little bit further back. Now, it does not interfere with the articulation. You can still do the double jointed elbow and get a lot of the range out of it. No problem there. But what it does do is it shortens that forearm. Now, if you look inside, you'll also see that now the little hole where you peg the hand into fits right to where it did originally. And that is only because you slid the gauntlet back further. But it does give it a more aesthetic look. Now, you are ready to replace the ball joint and the hands. But what I came to notice is not a big fan of the original hands that these came with. They also seem a little bit large. And the ball joint is just one of those big, angular ball joints. So don't really want to reuse that. Now, what I did find was that the very same figure that I used for the Thomas Wayne, which was the Keaton Flash Batman, the wrist ball joints are sculpted out and the hands are a little bit smaller, although they do have a sort of a fist appearance, even though they're like a gripping hand. And those fit a lot better with this figure. So you pop in that Keaton ball joint and then you warm up the hand and pop in the hand, and now you have a better fitting hand to this figure. It doesn't look so abnormally large. You still have wrist articulation, everything works, and aesthetically, it looks completely different. Now, I did put back the original modded fist that I had with the ring just for right now, but I do think that I'm eventually gonna take the other Keaton hand, put a ring on it, and add it to this John Stewart. Now, this will allow him to hold weapons or swords or constructs of guns, while at the same time it does sort of look more like a fist than a trigger hand does. And you can always use the Keaton fists instead of the gripping hands, and it will make this figure look awesome. Now, when you're done with all of this, the only other thing I did was actually paint the rings because they're all one solid green color, and I wanted to show how you can add black on the bottom part and it makes the costume a lot more consistent and flows without breaking up that black to green ratio when you move the shoulders around. And just to finish it off, I do want to show the original version. And when you put these two guys next to each other, you can very much see the difference in arm length. My custom version just looks more appealing to the eye and is going to look great up there on the shelf, while the original orangutan arms, still, if you have this figure, it's not a big deal. I have him like that in my collection as well. But this custom version just, takes it to that next level and looks way better than the original standard release. So, anyways, guys, really happy with that John Stewart. I may still do a little bit of mods, like change out the hand, and I may also paint him in a metallic green, the same way I have planned for this Hal Jordan. But very happy with the rest of these little custom jobs that I did. But anyways, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.